Good evening and welcome everyone to the next in our series of our Pioneer series is what we are calling these Fireside chats. This is I believe the fifth one where we are interviewing our founders. Desh is one of the 13 founders of TiE Boston. And Desh is special because not only is he a founder, but he's the founding president of TiE Boston. And I will say this, Desh, the 11 of us who came after you, our claim to fame is that we hold that seat which you once held.
Well, yeah, you've done a fantastic job.
And today, I'm going to give a very brief introduction of Desh just because he's one of the easiest people to introduce and also the toughest because if I really go into his accomplishments, I think we'll spend half the time of this webinar on that. So I'm just going to touch on a few highlights. As I said, of course, he's the founding president of TiE Boston. He's best known or well known for Sycamore Networks, which we all knew was a phenomenal success, but that's not the only one. There were several after that. And I do want to mention that he was appointed in 2010 by President Obama as co-chair of the National Advisory on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, making all of us Indians very, very proud of the seat that Desh held. Besides all his what I call entrepreneurial accomplishments, Desh is also very, very involved in philanthropy. Since we are in Boston, I'm going to, and since I'm from MIT, I'm going to just say this one thing is he is on the board of the MIT Corporation and also on the Dean of Schools advisory. So I'm going to stop with that and move over to Raj because I know Raj is going to say, give us a lot of more tidbits about Desh. Raj, I'm going to start with an anecdote. I was once introducing Raj at an event at Bank of America. And, before I could even get to his bio, someone from the audience raised their hand and said, let me just put it this way. Raj is the best wealth advisor out there. And the person who said that was the head of all of consumer banking for Bank of America. So we all stopped there and I said, okay, there's no need to introduce Raj anymore. So Raj has made it to the Forbes Best in State list, the Best in State Wealth Advisors for Massachusetts. And when I say best, he was ranked #1. You can't get higher than that. He also was on Barron's list of top 100 wealth advisors in America several times over. So I think at this point, he doesn't even consider it an accomplishment. But, I'll stop by saying as far as wealth advisors go, I think most people know that Raj is up there. The reason why Raj, I think, is the perfect person to moderate this fireside chat today is besides all this, he was maybe not in the room when it happened, but pretty much there when TiE Boston was formed, and he is a very close friend of Desh. So with that, Desh, I'm going to hand it over to Raj to take it.
Oh, thank you very much, Anu. That was a lovely introduction, a little too kind, but very nice. First of all, I want to congratulate you, Anu, on your inspired leadership of TiE. You took it over at a difficult time during the pandemic, and you kept the flag flying and kept people inspired and people to show up for TiE events and webinars. And so, kudos to you.
Thank you.
And Desh, you're one of the few people in Boston who can go by just the first name, Desh. I don't have to say anything more. You're a brand name by yourself, not just in Boston, but nationwide and globally. And Desh, love to hear how TiE got started. I know you were involved with TiE, right from the very beginning. Give us some glimpses of that journey and how it came about and your role in it.
Raj, thank you. Thank you. We probably met each other, I don't know, maybe 26, 27 years ago, I think. And it's been fun growing old together, some older than others. and I'm really looking forward to Saturday because some of the people, I probably haven't seen them for close to 20 years. And it'll be good to reconnect again. So, I think the Silicon Valley TiE started in the early 90s. And then they felt that it should expand. And I think Ramesh Kapoor, Rahul saying, some of these people used to be very active in TiE Silicon Valley. And so they said, well, maybe we should come and talk to Desh. And so a delegation from Silicon Valley came. They came over to our house and we met there and so on. And then they introduced this concept of tie. And then they said, why don't you become a president? And that was about the time when I was just about to sell Cascade Communications. And so I knew I'd have a little bit of time. And so we signed up, and then 13 people came together and worked very hard to actually get Thai going.
That's great, Thai. That's a great introduction, Desh. Desh, you are remarkable in many ways in terms of your entrepreneurial career. And I'm going to touch upon that briefly. But I think everybody is also interested in what Desh has been doing the past 20 years. When we spoke a few days ago, you said the first 16 years was about creating companies, and the next 20 years and many, many decades to come is about impact. But let's go to your entrepreneurial career. You talked about serendipity. It didn't happen by design. It wasn't a straight line. Give us a description of, what motivated you to strike out on your own?
Well, I think a lot of this is just, it wasn't like I was not born in a business family. So education was everything. So, went to IIT and then came to Canada, did my master's, and then I taught for a year as a professor. And then I thought I was going to be a professor, so I had to get a PhD. So I got a PhD. But just as I was finishing up my PhD in Canada, there was a little company in Toronto, which was very good in technology. Those days, the state of the art was about 300 bits per second on a phone line. And these guys had figured out how to do 9,600 bits per second on the phone line, which was like a dramatic those days. But unfortunately, the company wasn't doing well financially, and Canadian companies don't have good marketing and so on. So the head of engineering, Peter Brackett, he had to quit, and he came to teach at Queen's University because he had a PhD. So we spent a lot of time together, and we got to know each other. And Motorola came and bought that struggling company. And then they asked Peter Brackett to come back and be the head of engineering again. And about 3 months after he left, I finished up my PhD. And so Peter called me up and said, forget all this research. Why don't you come here? It's a lot of fun. And I had so much respect for Peter that I just went there, not really knowing anything. And we were about 20 people or so. And over the next 4 years, 1980 to 84, it was 400 people, $100 million business. And there were 3 of us who built that whole thing, the CEO, Ted Strain, Peter Brackett, and myself. So I got to do a lot of things that I didn't know I could do. I didn't know what they were, marketing and sales and finance and management and everything else. And so in 84, I and Jayashree said, this is a lot of fun, but maybe we should try this on our own. And so you can see how the university led to this Motorola, and Motorola led to that entrepreneurial urge. And most of the entrepreneurial journeys start with a lot of naivete. So I and Jayashree, but there was no venture capital in Toronto. So the venture capital was only Silicon Valley and Boston. In fact, I thought I was going to move to Silicon Valley. I had everything lined up within another division of Motorola, but something changed. And then finally we did an intercompany transfer and came to Boston. So it's kind of silly, a young couple just moving into the town and saying, I'm going to do a startup, right? But that's how they all start. And then it took about 3 years to get a green card, and then got it going.
But it wasn't success from day one for you, Desh.
No, actually, before I got the green card, I and another person, Bob Macklin. Bob Macklin was a Harvard Business School grad. He was a marketing guy in Motorola. And so we both put in $10,000. I couldn't quit the job because I didn't have a green card. And so we both put in 10,000 each, and he used to take a little bit of salary out of that. And we would meet every day at 4 a.m. and work till 8 a.m. Then I would come back to my job, and then he would continue to work on it. And we did that for 6 months, just before 87 crash. And when the 87 crash happened, it didn't look like we would be successful in raising money. And also Debbie, Bob Macklin's wife, got pregnant. And so he had to get a job. So he went ahead and got a job. But soon, within a couple of weeks after we decided to shut it down, my green card came through. And in the process of that whole year where we're trying to work on putting the plan together, we'd met a lot of people. So I'd met Frank Bruns, who was the VP of engineering in a company here called Proteon. And he was thinking of doing a startup. So Bob went and got a job, but I teamed up with Frank and resigned my job because I had a green card. And then we worked together for about a year without salary before we got funded. And then the dream come true. We raised $3 million from very prestigious people, Seven Rosen and T Associates and so on, Alex Brown. But unfortunately, within 4 months after we raised the money, and Jayshree had a job when I was off the payroll. And when I went on the payroll, she quit her job because the kids were very small. But about 3-4 months into it, unfortunately, I and my partner had a difference of opinion. And I didn't want to be the guy sitting around and saying, I told you so, I told you so. So I said, Frank, I think I'm going to leave. And he was happy because he didn't want to deal with me. And the board was also pretty okay because, this young immigrant, what does he know kind of thing. And so I quit. And that was not easy because, Jayshree didn't have a job. I didn't have a job. We had no income. And being in a foreign country, it's not like anybody can send you money. And so that was a little bit of a testing time. But fortunately, within about 4 or 5 months or so, I got seed funded to do the next company, Cascade Communications. And fortunately, that worked out. So
success has come out of failure. And would you say a lot of grit and persistence? I mean, you stayed with the vision. You didn't go, get a job like your partner. You said, I'm going to stay on this entrepreneurial route. Was that hard?
No. When I tell the story, it sounds like it was such a hardship and everything else. But I think it's each of these things that brought me a comfort zone. Having grown in a very middle class Brahmin family, like your comfort zone is very, very small, right? Your deviations from your life are very, very small, very narrow. And you go through these experiences, and then you find that it's really not that bad. It'll kill you. and so I think that's what the entrepreneurial journey is about. You get into situations which you never dealt with before, and they're difficult, and that's what broadens your comfort zone. And the other thing is, you don't, if you keep doing, also I and Jayshree, we always felt, we both went to IIT, we both are very well educated, everything else. So our attitude was, we will never starve. We can always get a breakfast and lunch and dinner. So what else is there? And so you want to have fun with the rest of your life, right? I mean, you don't want to be worried about it. And so I think as long as you're doing things that you want to do, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. In fact, I used to be like a pretty senior guy in Motorola, a big officer, everything else. And a lot of my IIT friends, they were McKinsey and, like having pretty good jobs. And they would come sometimes to meet us when I was unemployed. I used to have an old beat up Toyota Corolla, small little house, everything else. And they would feel bad for me. And I would say, no, don't feel bad. This is what I want to do, And so I think at the end of the day, if you get up in the morning and if you're excited about the day and you like doing what you're doing, there's nothing more to life than that. So
if you're passionate, it's not work.
No, it's fun. It's fun. So you come across a problem and then you say, okay, let me see what I'm going to do about this. And you get engaged with that particular problem. And it's just fun.
Absolutely. So after Cascade, certainly we all know about the great success of Sycamore and other companies you started. But what people are most fascinated about, Desh, is that pivot you made. You made that 360-degree pivot. I worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of, people who have done well, by starting companies. And they always struggle with getting into philanthropy. It seems sort of too daunting. Now, did you always have a grand vision, or how did you get started? Love to hear.
Yeah. So, I think what I realized in life is that anything that you get started with is exciting. Like, first time you get a job and you go on a business trip and somebody pays you for the airfare and lets you stay in a hotel, pays for the meal. I mean, you just can't believe that that's actually happening, right? And you know how quickly it gets stale. So I think everything is exciting, but once you keep doing the same thing, it becomes a chore. And the trick that I learned is that when it becomes a chore, you have to give it up because of two reasons. Number one, you're not having fun with it anymore. And secondly, there's another guy for whom it's a big opportunity. He'll do a lot better job than you can, right? And but most of the people feel that, but it's very difficult for them to uh, make that jump. It's like a trapeze. You're stuck up on a trapeze. You want to get off the trapeze, but they want to hang on to the next trapeze without letting go of this trapeze. And when you let this trapeze go, there's a chance that you'll fall down, and then you have to climb up again, right? And so that's but in my case, because after Cascade, the very first company didn't work out, the 6-month break that I had was an involuntary break. And so when that was an involuntary break, after I started doing things, I found that to be pretty profound in the sense, when you create such wide space for yourself, you don't think incrementally, you think a little bit quantum. So after that, every 5 years, I've done that. I stopped doing what I'm doing. I mean, at least not do anything new, create a lot of white space, and then say, hey, what do I want to do next? What is it that's exciting for me? And I've been doing it consistently. And that's why you see me like do different things. And that next thing that I do is not something that I know. It's not premeditated. It is something that I find as I go along. And if it's exciting, I stick with it. And then it's a lot of fun working on it. So.
Desh, on that note, I mean, you've created, certainly I remember when you created the Deshpande Foundation and you created the Center for Entrepreneurship at MIT. At that time, it was, what you did was very bold. It was an experiment. And that led to various other, nonprofit ventures. Give us a brief description of the various sort of nonprofits you've started and your involvement.
Okay. So the way that got started was, so I had a lot of fun being an entrepreneur. And I and Jayshree said, well, we've had a lot of fun and we've made money. How can we create more of these opportunities for other people? That was the sort of the initial focus. And most of the stuff that we did came out of Bell Labs and IBM and so on. And there was no more Bell Labs in 2000. And therefore, the center of gravity for idea generation had moved to universities. But the universities weren't doing that well in terms of getting these ideas out of the campuses. And so that was the first focus. That's when I joined the MIT board. Let me just use one picture here, Raj, that sort of is easy for people to understand what I'm talking about. So, if I sort of look at this, so the world has 7 billion people, out of which about 2 billion people have disposable income and 5 billion don't have disposable income. And most of our careers, most of time, we all work on that 2 billion people, right? Because they're the people who have the options and so on. And everything about entrepreneurship, doesn't matter whether it's the top or the bottom, it's all about solving problems that those people have. When people have problems in that disposable income category, they have choice. So they're Googling for solutions. Every time they have a problem, they're always Googling for solutions, right? And therefore, you have to compete for the opportunity to make a difference in their lives. So you need to bring something new to the world. So innovation becomes very important. And there's a lot of innovation that happens in universities because $50 billion a year funding every year, taxpayers. So the idea behind the Deshpande Center at MIT was to bring relevance to that innovation. How do you connect innovator to real problems so that when he finishes innovating, he creates an idea that can have an impact? And that was the idea behind the Deshpande Center, so that it creates opportunities for lots of entrepreneurs. And that led to some more centers in Canada, and then NSF, we funded a program for ICOR, which is a nationwide program now, and then we're doing something similar in India. So I think because of all our career path, which was all focused on making a difference for the people who have disposable income, first was a very natural thing, which is to create even more opportunities for other people. And of course, that ecosystem is so well developed now, and TIE has played a bigger role in really creating that ecosystem. So this was the the motivation to get that going.
Desh, when you and I talked, you were speaking about a new model for agriculture. And a simple idea, but a powerful idea, which sort of people know about, but nobody has actually implemented it in a systematic way, and that can transform rural India in a significant way. To tell us something about it. How does it develop it?
Yeah. So what happened, Raj, is that we got this thing going in MIT, and after 5 years or so, this was about maybe 15 years ago, we said, what can we do in India? And so the first natural thing to do was to duplicate the MIT Center in IIT Madras. But somehow technological innovation didn't sound that exciting. So we said, let's work on the bottom 5 billion people. And for the insight for the bottom 5 billion people was that you can't start with innovation. You have to start with relevance. You have to co-create the solution with them. You have to build capacity within that community. And then slowly you bring in other innovations, right? And so because of this, we started this thing called the Social Innovation Sandbox. And that has grown into a large program now in India. So I'll tell you, we sort of, this building was built in 2008. And then we built a 300,000 square foot campus. This is maybe 5 years old. This is maybe 3 years old. It's a 100,000 square foot incubator for startups. We have 250 companies here. And they're all focused on coming up with solutions for semi-urban and rural India. And then this campus is just being constructed right now. It's just about 150 miles from Hyderabad in Telangana. So we have all these campuses and quite a bit of human infrastructure. We have 1,000 people on the payroll in India. And out of 1,000, the tried very hard to get both connectedness and competence. What I mean by competence is that if you look at all the TIE members, obviously they're very competent, because they have to survive in a very competitive world, right? So the competence is there. And they all have a desire to do something for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. But it's very hard to get connected, right? So out of the 1,000 people, we have about 100 people who are all IIT, IIM, some MIT and so on. And then we have about 900 people who come from the communities where they actually work. So let me talk a little bit about this program that you talked about, which is a farm pond program. So what happens in a lot of these rain-fed areas, there's quite a bit of water actually, because they get anywhere from 60 centimeters to 80 centimeters of rain, which is like a lot of water, right? But it just flows away and they don't have the water when they need it. So if you dig a hole that's 100 feet by 100 feet by 12 feet, it captures the rainwater and it can irrigate 5 acres of land and you get 2 crops. So it immediately doubles and triples the income. So, this program started in 2013 when Ratan Tata had come to Hooghly actually. And I said, hey, Ratan, this is a great idea. We should do it because his farmer will own it and he'll look after it because it's his property and so on. And so he gave me 5 machines. And so over the next 2 years, we built 150 of these, learned how to do it. And then in phase 2, we built 6,000 of them. And now we just launched a program to do 100,000 of them, right? So, and so now that we have the scale, we have the opportunity to bring in a lot of innovation. So in fact, we just built this Rural Transformation Technology Center. It uses ML and AI and tracks about 30 satellites. And given a piece of land, we can recreate the history of that land for the last 10 years from a water perspective. And then we use the same center to actually track the logistics as we're constructing these farm ponds. And then after the farm pond is constructed, we monitor the crop using the satellite images. So that because the financing is done by a bank, and I want to make sure that we have a zero default. The farmer actually pays back that loan, because not only does his income go up, but also his credit rating gets built up, right? And so now that we have the thing, and also we bought about 11 acres of farm, and we put in all the sophisticated technology that you see on the right hand side, so that we can actually run a lot of experiments and really find out how farmers can really optimize. Because right now the soil is really bad. The carbon content of the soil is very low. So we need to somehow revive the soil in India, but also everywhere in the world, actually. And so there's a lot of very interesting experiments that are going on. So it's pretty exciting. It's a lot of fun compared to even doing startups. I mean, because the impact is pretty profound.
You're a social entrepreneur, and you've become an agent of change, Desh. And as you rightly said about India, is you're trying to show best practices that eventually get the government involved, so that you become the catalyst, very much like Akshay Patra, where it was started as a private nonprofit, but the government has now taken it up in a major way, and it's part of the government initiative, to feed children. So hopefully this becomes a movement by itself. That could, especially with what's happening in Ukraine, India can supply the world now with agricultural products. Now, there's something I'm very proud of, Desh. We all, our country of origin is India, but this is our adopted country, and this is where we're going to live and spend the rest of our days. And it's important, I think, for all of us to help the communities we live in. And I know you did something significant with E4All in Lowell and Merrimack Valley, which, some of the poorest communities in Massachusetts. Tell us about that and the kind of people you helped out.
Yeah. So Raj, the way that got started is that, we started off with the Deshpande Center at MIT, and then we built this social innovation sandbox in India. And so the original thinking was US needs technological innovation and India needs social innovation. And that split that I talked about, 2 billion, 5 billion, is roughly 20%, 80% in India, and it's roughly 80%, 20% in US. And then we realized that India needs technological innovation and US needs social innovation. And so we started a center at IIT Madras, which is now a nationwide program for technological innovation, very similar to what Deshpande Center does, but across the whole country there, and hoping that the government will adopt it in another few more years. But then we also realized that US needs social innovation. So we brought a lot of the learning from India. Actually, it's all learnings from India that came back to Lowell Lawrence and this E4All. So the philosophy of the social innovation is that, there are three types of people in this world. There are some people who are oblivious to problems, leave them alone. Some people see a problem and complain. Some people see a problem and get all excited about it. And the only difference between a vibrant community and impoverished community, a vibrant company, impoverished company, is just a mix of these people, And so if you go to MIT, Harvard, any of these places, everybody is chopping at the bit to solve the problems, right? In fact, their problem is not having good enough problems to solve. So everybody wants to show you their app that's going to save your life and convince you that it's a fantastic thing, right? But the side effect of that is problems don't hang around in those communities too long because somebody's going to grab it, right? Whereas in impoverished communities, problems become chronic, they get deadlocked. And then some people try to solve it, it's very hard. And so after a while, they give up and then they feel victimized, they feel helpless, and then they start complaining. So complaining becomes the dominant culture. So all the stuff that we do in India and in US is culturally trying to change complainers to problem solvers. Because once people make that transition from complaining to problem solving, they'll never go back. And you don't have to tell them which problems to solve because they know their problems, right? And so E4All is a way to excite these people to get businesses going. So we run it in 13 places right now, and we're hoping to scale it over the next 5 years. So we have 1,000 businesses, and these are all small businesses that hire maybe 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. And
What's an
75% of,
what's an example of a E for All business?
well, somebody starts a bakery. A lot of them are service things.
Okay.
So what happens is these impoverished communities don't have the services that you have in Cambridge or Boston or some of the more affluent society communities. And so they start those things, but also provide services to the more affluent community. And so out of the 1,000 businesses, 75% of them are led by women. 40% of them were previously unemployed. 70% of them are BIPOC. And so I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, we are going to scale it up to 50,000 new businesses. So the idea here is, when I was starting Cascade, in all of Massachusetts, maybe there were 6 entrepreneurs. There was Ken Olson, Ed DeCastro, maybe Jit Saxena. He, even though we didn't know each other, but very few, right? And you fast forward 40 years, it's amazing how that ecosystem has been built up. And Ty had a lot to do with it too. But now, if there is an entrepreneur who is motivated, energetic, has an idea that actually addresses a problem, more than likely he'll be successful because the ecosystem is built up. My hope is that in the next 20 years, we can build a similar ecosystem for these people who are being left behind. Because this is not a one-time problem. There's always, technology is going to make a lot of advances. There are going to be people having fun automating, but there's also going to be people who are being automated. And they need to find a way to get back into the economy again. So my hope is that slowly we'll start scaling this. For example, workforce development. When I used to work with co-chair that Council for Obama, the workforce development in US spends about $4 billion a year. But the old model doesn't work anymore. The old model was you trained people, you gave tax incentives for big companies to come to your community, and they hired you. They're not coming anymore. So now, for every 20, 30 job seekers, you need to have a job maker. And so the workforce development has to redirect itself to say, okay, let's take 5% of our $4 billion a year and direct it towards job makers, right? And so, I think, and I've had success in sort of getting government to adopt that I-Core program, which came out of Deshpande Center. So I'm hoping if we, and so I'm become a strong believer of this policy by proof of concept. You prove it in one place, two place. But because I am not that connected with the government, even less so in India, I want to create these proofs that are so obvious and so compelling that people don't question that it's a good thing to do. And then I want them to come to me and say, hey, this is a great thing. How do we make this into a policy? And then there's some chance that I'll be successful in making it happen. So
that's outstanding, Desh. The fact you're doing it right here, in our community where we live, and enhancing the people here. And as you said, it started off in India, and you're, importing that idea to the US, and how terrific is that? We have about 6 minutes before we start the Q&A, so I'm going to do a rapid fire, a few questions. Entrepreneurs who've sold their companies, many of them would start a donor advice fund. Foundation does a lot of work, and they put a bunch of stock, they get a deduction, and they sit on that money for a long time, because philanthropy is hard, to think about who to give the money, the metrics. So you can have two models. One is you can be like Warren Buffett and say, my friend Bill Gates does a great job, and I'm going to give my money to the Bill Gates Foundation or any of the other foundations, or AIF or Akshay Patra, or that is one. And the second thing is to do something of your own. So what advice would you have for an entrepreneur?
Well, ultimately, people have to do where their heart is. But I would say it's a lot of fun. Entrepreneurship is all about making a difference. And so there's no real difference between the social entrepreneurship, regular entrepreneurship. It's all about making a difference. And when you pick an idea, the idea doesn't work usually. You have to keep working on it. But there's a lot of aha moments along the way. And it's those aha moments that we all live for. And those aha moments are a lot more profound in the social sector than in the for-profit sector. So if you're fortunate enough to actually able to get beyond your own entrepreneurship and become an enabler for other people to become entrepreneurs, either in the bottom or the top, I think that's very very rewarding.
Absolutely. And I find personally, having been involved in the American India Foundation and other philanthropies, I find the ROI in terms of happiness is at least 100 times more, giving money away and having an impact on people. And Desh, you've so shown it by dint of example and what you've done the past 20 years. Now, you said something profound the other day, Desh. You said people should start early in their philanthropic journey, not late. Give us your insights there.
Yeah, early and slowly, because some people get all excited and they think that if only they gave some time, wrote a big check, problems are going to get solved. Problems are very complex in the social sector. They won't get solved that easily. And so what happens is it's a little bit like playing with fire. If you go stick your hand right inside the fire, you get burnt, and then you become bitter, and then you're useless for yourself and you're useless for the rest of the world. So inch slowly into the fire so that you're enjoying the warmth. And as you get more and more comfortable, you can get closer and closer, right? And so get started early, because you can do whatever. Each one of us can say, hey, I can give X hours and Y dollars. And so get started, because it's a long learning process, because this is a difficult field. And unless you stick with it and understand all the nuances of it, just like you do in your entrepreneurial career, you won't get a hang of it. And so I would say, don't wait until the last minute. Get started early, get engaged in some capacity, and as you get into it, you will automatically learn more and more about it and get more engaged.
Absolutely. And it's more fun to give money away while you're alive. You can see it happen. You can see the impact. And a lot of people do it as part of their estate planning, but I think it's far more profound. I have a question which came to me early on, and this is from another philanthropist. In the past 25 years, Desh, have seen the golden era of diaspora philanthropy. And I recall in 2002, all the major diaspora organizations for India, Akshay Patra, AIF, Pratham, Ekal Vidyalaya, probably raised a couple of $1 million combined. And today, fast forward 20 years, we're probably raising about $30 to $40 million combined. I mean, dramatic increase. And all these organizations are doing their bit, whatever they think is right to address the many, many challenges of India. My question is, in the US, is there a way for these organizations to work together to create some kind of a united way? Because we're all working towards the same purpose. And perhaps that could be a way of channelizing giving to these various causes. What do you think of that as a concept?
Well, I think it's just like companies, if you sell a toothpaste and toothbrush, you have to stick with it and you have to specialize to some extent, right? And so, and see what happens is in the for-profit, you have execution excellence. In the non-profit, you have compassion. And execution excellence does not happen in the non-profit because you don't have a natural feedback loop. Even though people give you some money, it's not like buying a stock. A stockholder watches you like a hawk, right? And so, so I think it's important to stay very focused and do your own thing, because when you start combining things, we used to do that initially with Akshay Patra, where we would say, hey, Food Bank and Akshay Patra, we do something in the US, something there, why don't we combine the two? And then that partnership always leads to unhappy ending, because either one party feels like they're doing a lot more work than what they're getting, and so they get disappointed, right? And so it's very hard to strike that balance as to when you combine all that effort, who does what. United Way is different in the sense they raise money for everything, and they're mostly a grant making agency, right? Whereas all these organizations are implementing agencies.
Absolutely.
And so, but I think it's okay. I think what's happening is most of the people donate to multiple organizations. And also, I think it's very easy for any one of us to look at all the problems. And then initially you start saying, well, what is the most compelling cause? Is it the starving kid in Africa? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the most talented kid but doesn't have the opportunity? And you can go crazy, right? You can get very easily paralyzed. So my suggestion to people is don't get paralyzed. Pick something. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as you can make a difference in the life of one person or one environment, one animal, I think you're doing a good stuff. So instead of getting paralyzed and getting hung up on that question, trying to answer that, pick something that touches your heart and just do it.
That's right. Touches your heart. I mean, that's the key thing, which moves you, whatever you've seen in your childhood, or to have an impact in India, or have an impact here. So we have a bunch of questions here, and I'm going to parse some of them. And the first one actually comes from Anu, our fearless president here, who says, with AI becoming more pervasive, how do you think older workers need to be reskilled so they're not left without jobs when they need them the most?
Well, I mean, this is an age-old problem, except it's accelerating a little bit more. You probably remember when ATMs came along, in the banks. Everybody was so worried, what will happen to the tellers, and will there be no tellers? Will they all lose jobs, and so on? And what seems to happen is that a lot of these things, they expand the economy in some ways. It's true that over the course of time, some of the jobs become obsolete. But I think, unfortunately, being an entrepreneur, somehow innovation entrepreneurship is what creates this divide, right? Because it's the innovation entrepreneurship that creates a new way to live, and it obsoletes the old way. But I also believe that the same tool can be used to repurpose people. If people, either they can sit around, I think the world is going to change. There's absolutely no doubt that's going to change. So everybody has only two options. Either you can grudgingly accept the change, or you can willingly lead the change. So if you can get the right mindset and right culture where people say, well, okay, I mean, that's no good. What else can I do? It doesn't have to be AI. I mean, not everybody has to learn AI, because there'll be a lot of non-AI jobs in the world. But you need the mindset that says, let me see what else is relevant and work on it, right? As opposed to grudgingly sort of complain about it and then not be able to adopt. So I think the mindset to adapt to new things is the only way to survive in a changing world.
Got it. We have a very insightful question from Rakesh Kamdar, a celebrated local entrepreneur, as we all know. And he says, fundraising for uniting these organizations, going by the last question, these various organizations may be complicated. But his question is, could TIE start a group to share best practices, bring these organizations, sort of prioritize social issues, share ideas and what they're doing? What do you think of that? And I think TIE is doing that, but in a more formal sense, should there be an effort on the part of TIE, just like, one of these social, interest groups they have?
Yeah, so TIE, this is, I was the first, the Kanwal Ricky was the TIE global chair, and he was there for 6 months, and then he raised his new venture capital fund. So I became the chair. So I was very involved. C.K. Pralhad, Rajat Gupta, like all of us were very, we're trying to sort of figure out what TIE should do. And finally, the theme was to democratize entrepreneurship. How do you bring entrepreneurship to the bottom of the pyramid and all that stuff, right? And the idea was to raise money, get a little bit more into philanthropy and all this stuff. But it hasn't been very successful. I think where TIE has done really good job is to connect people. So what happens is, for example, before Thai, I probably knew 2 or 3 people in all of Boston, Indians. And after Thai, I knew hundreds of people. And so and also not just people in Boston, but people globally, right? Because I did 45 chapters, I toured every chapter and everything else. And then what I found is that Rajat actually used to be he's obviously a very good strategy guy. So his thing was, hey, we need these organizations. We need one for culture, one for philanthropy, one for something else. And then the like-minded people all started coming together and start doing their own thing. There was a bunch of us who were trying to start this university in India. We had raised $1 billion actually. And then unfortunately, it didn't go through in India. But there's a lot of people who came together, and they came together because of Thai. So Thai becomes an enabler for champions to come together and do something. But it's very difficult for Thai to take one cause and champion it because there's just too many interests within Thai.
It's got to be a platform where people can talk about ideas, but not necessarily one cause.
Yeah, and then these Thai retreats. I mean, they're fantastic in terms of, you go someplace and you hang around for 3-4 days with lots of other people. You really get to know people. Absolutely. And that's where people make connections, and then they come up with ideas and then say, hey, maybe we should do this. And they've done it. I mean, Thai has been an enabler for lots of different things.
No doubt, no doubt. A question from Ignacio Castro, and he says, E4All has had a great impact on the Latin American community. And Desh, he's interested in hearing your thoughts on the Latinx demographic and what else can be done to support them even more across the country.
Well, I think we were struggling as to how we scale. We are in 13 places, and we want to be in 50 more in the next 5 years. And each place we start 30 new businesses, right? But that's still only 1,500. But what COVID did was it got us to go virtual. So our ambition is to hit 50,000 new businesses over the next 5 years virtually, but also do these 50 chapters. So, and one of the things that slows it down is the mentors, because this is a very rigorous process where we get 3 mentors, and mentors are just like anybody from Thai Group. 3 people for each one of these entrepreneurs. And so now we can build it virtually, right? So there's a lot of companies signing up, Thai signing up. And so I think it's, if you can get enough mentors who can, also it's a little bit of a different mentoring. It's not really sort of starting off with what's your competitive advantage, this, that, all that kind of stuff, not complicated stuff, but just to be there to support and say, I know you can do it. I know you can do it, because a lot of these people, they go through a very hard time. But that's what makes him so hardy, because a good entrepreneur is, he's got 3 characteristics. One is he knows how to do with what he has, as opposed to an MBA who says, hey, give me $1 billion in 10 years, I'll build a better business. He knows how to take pain, and these guys are extraordinary in terms of their ability to take pain. And then you need some skills, and all they don't have is that skill, right? So if you can connect them to the real world and provide the skill, I think they'll do very well. I mean, I find the life of these entrepreneurs to be just as exciting as Bill Gates or anybody else, because they are just as excited as any other entrepreneur. And so if all of us can become mentors and help out these entrepreneurs, I think we'll get there.
That's outstanding. I do have a question about somebody asking about how to raise money, and I will direct them to Anu Chitrapu. Anu, you can tell them how to raise money, and the Thai Angels. So we'll stick largely to Desh's story, and Desh, as I look at your life and what you have created, and of course we're all very proud of what you've accomplished, but you've got a long way to go, Desh. And I'm sure you think about your legacy. How would you like to be remembered?
As a jolly good fellow who had fun every day. I think some people who want to leave a big mark on the world and everything else, but then, like each one of us is so minuscule compared to the whole universe, the earth, and it's all going to evolve in its own way. And I think if we can make a difference in the life of any one or two or three or four human beings, I think that's fun. And I think reinventing itself. Raj, we were talking about your 93-year-old mother and my 97-year-old father. They're still live and kicking, very excited about life. And they're great role models for all of us. I think we have to keep reinventing ourselves. We have to be doing things that excite. And you want to be getting up in the morning and be excited about the day. If you have that done, then there's nothing more to life than that.
Truly well said, Desh, and something everybody should sort of take to heart. A question or a suggestion from Adi Tibrewal, and he says, could both of you share three major things you've learned along the way? And Desh, you've shared many, many things, but summarize three things for us in very simple terms, three takeaways.
Well, I think being a good entrepreneur is all about being naive and being optimistic. I think in some ways, if you're too thoughtful, you'll never do anything because you can see how all the problems that you can line up. And so naivete is an asset, not a liability. Second thing is optimism. Entrepreneurs somehow, doesn't matter how hard the situations are, they always believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today. And that's not a bad way to live, whether it's true or not, who cares? If you live every day of your life thinking that tomorrow is going to be better than today, it's a fantastic life. So I would say, don't ever lose your naivete, the childishness in you, and the optimism. If you can maintain those two, then you have it made.
Great pieces of advice for anybody in any business. And Adi, I'm honored that you asked me to say a few things, and I'll just keep it very brief. But I echo one thing which Desh said: optimism. Optimism can change the world. Optimism can result in finding solutions to intractable problems, like the Ukraine situation. You have to be optimistic that things will get better, and that's what human beings have, which I think is a remarkable quality. You can't give that up. And the second thing, which I would mention is, and I meet a lot of young people, is don't choose a career because of the money you can make. Choose something you're passionate about, and money is sort of a byproduct of whatever you do. But you've got to be happy in what you're doing. It's not just the paycheck, but you got to feel good about yourself. And Dash, you mentioned that again, that feeling good at the end of the day that you've done something which is impacting other people. And finally, I think giving back, I think, is important. We're all incredibly fortunate. Many of us are the 1% or the 5% or the 10%, by dint of being born on the right side of the track into a good middle-class family. Education was important. We got lucky, came to this country. And I think to give back energizes the whole ecosystem. So those are three things I would mention. So with that, Dash, it's been a real joy and a pleasure. You're an old friend of mine, but you're still very young, Dash. You got a lot of gas in that tank, and a lot of enthusiasm. And I'm sure you'll continue to do great things, in the decades to come. And with that, let me invite my friend Anu Chitrapu to say a few words.
All right. Thank you so much for this, Desh, for your words of wisdom, and Raj for actually bringing all those out. I don't know how we managed, but I think we actually covered quite a broad spectrum of topics, all the way from entrepreneurship, the business world, to the nonprofit. And, my key takeaway, which I hope to live by, is operational excellence, or execution excellence, as you called it, in nonprofits. So whichever nonprofits we are involved in, I think we should push for that. And compassion in the for-profit world, something that I think we all can really, really show that we can do it. Raj, thank you so much for doing this. And of course, Desh, a quick note from Thai Boston. I know there were some questions about raising money and what we do. Literally, Thai Boston covers the entire spectrum. We catch them young with the TYE youth program. We have a program for universities now, for university students. We also tackle minority founders. So we have a women's pitch competition. And then for those looking for seed money, we have Thai Angels. And then, when you're ready to like scale it up, we have our award-winning scale up program, which received a grant from the governor's office, the governor of Massachusetts. So literally, if you think about it, over the last 25 years, Thai Boston has gone end to end. So anyone who has questions about these, please contact us at the Thai office. And I hope to see many of you at our 25th anniversary gala, which is going to be a historic milestone, not just for Thai Boston, but I think for Boston with our network. So hope to see you there on May 7th. With that, thank you all and good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu. So we'll see you all on Saturday.
Yes, see you all on Saturday.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.